What's up, y'all? Cam that guy here, back once again with another YouTube video, man. So in this YouTube video, I'm going to be reacting to weed. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to be reacting to weed. You know what I'm saying? By this type of video by this guy in a nutshell, Cruise guest subject. I don't know how to say that shit. But I'm going to be reacting to this. We have to talk about weed. I think this will be a good video for me to react to. You know what I'm saying? This will be a nice video for me to give it some insight on. I do not smoke weed. Weed, when I tried to smoke weed, it was not good for me. It made me choke. It made me cough. I don't see the point in smoking weed. I mean, I guess it does have benefits, but I don't see the reason to smoke weed. Like I don't. You better off not smoking it. I mean, you'll perform better. Like it's a drug. Like why do people do drugs type shit? Like what is the drugs doing for you? But we're about to, react to this shit.
World. It's just recently been legalized in Germany, and for very
Oh,
good
so
reasons.
weed just recently
Compared to
got
legal
legalized in
drugs
Germany.
like alcohol, which will cause 1 in 20 deaths just this year, cannabis is pretty.
It says alcohol will cause 1 in 20 deaths. This is true. You know what I'm saying? People that drink alcohol and shit like that. You drink and drive, it could kill you. You drink and do other activities, it could kill you. Or you could just get toxic poison from alcohol. Alcohol can poison. You get alcohol poison. Like, why do people do drugs? Is what I'm trying to figure out. Like, what is doing alcohol or weed? Like, what is it doing for you? You know what I'm saying? This is a video I'm glad I stumbled across. This is a nice video for me to upload on my channel. But anyway, back to it.
Wild. So, to justify harsh prosecution and punishment, its negative effects have been wildly overstated. Naturally, there was a lot of pushback, and here's something went wrong. If you followed the discourse over the last few years, you might have got the impression that weed has almost only upsides and few, if any, negative side effects. We ourselves contributed to that narrative. What made this worse is that criminalization made it very hard for scientists to study cannabis, especially its long-term effects. They faced bureaucratic and legal hurdles, and studies often had to rely on small sample sizes. In the last few years, this finally started to change, so it's time to bring new evidence to the discussion. And, well,
Let's
it's
see what
not
they're gonna
pretty.
talk about. Let's see what
While
they're about
weed
to
is
say.
still much less harmful than alcohol, it
Yeah, it
does
is.
have a dark side.
Right.
It is.
Before we get into that dark side, weed is less harmful than alcohol by a long shot. Weed is probably one of the more less harmful drugs out there, but it's still bad. It still does damage to your body. Let's let that be known. But anyway,
More addictive than we thought, and can have significant negative effects if you use it long term. It seems that. What are you doing? Before you tell us how dumb we are, please watch the video. To be crystal clear, we think prohibition doesn't work and cannabis should be legal. But this also means that we need to treat it as what it is, a drug, with unique upsides and downsides.
yeah,
So let's take an honest look at
it
some of
does
the
have up
latest
and
research
downs.
together.
It does have its
Weed
pros and
is getting
cons.
stronger and stronger.
Okay.
Cannabis's magic juice is tetrahydrocannabinol, THC. It docks on your cannabinoid receptors, which affects various brain functions. THC activates some regions and calms down others, creating a fun
Okay.
cocktail of sensations. The more THC, the more intense the high. And
Okay, so the more THC you get, the more intense the high. So the more of that shit you get, the more intense the high, and it gives you a good overall feeling and shit. That gives you a feeling and shit like that. Okay, let's go ahead and keep going.
it's the high. And people seem to be into higher highs, or at least this is what the market is providing. In the US, Canada, and in Europe, the concentration of THC in legal and illegal cannabis products has more than doubled in the last few decades.
The
While having
United
more
States
potent
got that
strains of
strong
bread,
weed.
products like edibles or concentrates with more than 60% THC.
Oh yeah, let me also speak of this. They do have edibles, right? They have edibles that can make you high as well. You know what I'm saying? I'm aware of this as well. Thankfully, I never got high before, and I don't plan to.
Have become increasingly common, while the share of products with less than 15% THC has declined. Unfortunately, just about every problem weed creates gets worse at higher THC doses. At the same time, more and more people use weed. In the US, more people consumed cannabis daily than alcohol for the first time in 2022. In Canada, 26% of people 16 and older use it, up from 22% in 2018.
Damn.
It's not possible to say if
What a
legalization
difference.
is the reason for this, though, since studies are pretty inconsistent and vary massively between different users. In some, consumption went up. In others, it stayed stable, and the trend to use more weed began in the early 90s and sped up in the 2000s, way earlier than legalization.
Yeah.
So today, more people consume more weed than ever before in the last century, and it's the strongest it's ever been. What are we seeing?
So weed is as strong as it ever been right now than it ever has before. Interesting.
As a result of this, let's start with something that used to get you laughed out of the room: addiction. Weed addiction and withdrawal symptoms. A big narrative about weed is that it's not addictive, or at least not that big of a deal. And for most people, this is true. Studies clearly show that the majority handle it well. For 8 out of 10 using weed, it's just a casual high and not problematic at all.
Yeah, some people can easily, step aside from weed, but some people are addicted to weed, and some people do have withdrawal symptoms, right? A withdrawal symptom is like when you continuously do something over and over again, you have withdrawal, so you start to have more side effects than what you really are doing it, right? So, for example, right? Let's say somebody is addicted to watching porn, right? If you take a day or two off watching porn, you start having withdrawal symptoms. You start thinking about porn a lot. This, that, and the third, you might go back to it. Or jacking off, right? Let's say you jack off every day or some shit. You take a day or two off, you start having withdrawal systems, right? Your dick start feeling weird. You start getting hard for no reason and shit like that, right? It's never good just to go cold turkey. You know what I'm saying? If you have a jack off problem or a sex problem or shit like that, you gotta gradually cut down and shit. You know what I'm saying? So those are examples of withdrawal symptoms. You know what I'm saying? For people that don't know how it feels to be have a drug withdrawal system, I just gave y'all an example of a withdrawal. Anyway, back to the topic at hand.
About 2 in 10 users develop a cannabis use disorder, or CUD. CUD has 11 different symptoms, from the inability to stop when you've had enough, to using it when you know it will have negative consequences, to tolerance and withdrawal. They can all basically be reduced to you're doing it too often, even if it's bad for you, and it's less fun than it could be. There are 3 major risk
How this
factors
guy
here:
talking?
the amount of THC, how often you consume, and your age when you start using cannabis. The more
Yeah.
THC, the more often, and the younger you are when you start, the higher your risk. If you smoke too much weed too often, it will have negative impacts on your life.
It
So,
will, most
if this is
definitely.
you, toning it down a bit will make a big difference. This develops a serious addiction. They usually consume
I'm gonna
daily,
edit this
and
video,
their
I'm gonna
life
cut
is
some of that out.
significantly impaired or held back because they spend a lot of their time either using or recovering from cannabis use. Since their
Yeah.
brain is building a tolerance, they need increasingly high doses or stronger weed, often both. Studies found a variety of negative effects. Heavy users can experience bad moods, feel irritable, restless, paranoid, anxious, and even depressive. In a sad
I
twist
know
of
we
irony,
cause all the
studies found a
symptoms. Let me
variety of
get ready to
negative
pause
effects.
it.
Heavy users can experience bad
So
moods,
heavy
feel
users.
irritable, restless, paranoid, anxious, and even depressed.
Okay. So these are some of the symptoms weed cause for heavy use: bad mood, irritable, restless, paranoid, anxious, depressive. That's interesting. I always thought weed make you go to sleep, but it turns out weed actually make you stay up. I did not know that. Bad mood, yeah, that's something I know. Paranoia, I know that's something. Irritable, yeah. Anxious, I didn't know it make you feel anxious, and I did not know it make you feel depressed. But anyway, let's keep going.
In a sad twist of irony, for many addicts it feels like they need weed to fight these symptoms. Maybe it did actually help at first, while in reality it makes those symptoms stronger and more persistent.
Right.
Studies also found that loneliness and frequent cannabis use go hand in hand. If you feel lonely, you're more likely to use weed, and if you use weed, you may experience more loneliness. It's not always easy to say which came
Interesting,
first, but they
interesting.
seem to reinforce each other.
Makes sense though, makes
So,
sense.
on the one hand, cannabis makes loneliness feel much less bad. On the other hand, it can also make you feel more socially awkward than you actually are and withdraw from friends. This can lead to a down.
It's crazy how I seen a comment. You seen that comment underneath it, right when they hit that time stamp. That's when I ended up seeing it. It says 5:45 time stamp hit home. That's interesting. You end up getting a text message. Hey, do you want to hang or you want to send it? You send a text message like that. That's crazy. Yeah, man. Speak on loneliness, man. I'm lonely right now, man. I mean, it's good for me to be lonely right now, but at the same time, my nigga need to be around some air. I need to be around some good energy. I need to be around people and shit. Like, being lonely is not good. I want people to know being lonely can make you depressed. It can make you do this, that, and the third. No, it's not making me depressed. Just that I realize I live in a cinematic, I have a cinematic life. I'm in the Matrix right now. You see what I'm saying? So my life is all over the place. You know what I'm saying? But it's kind of like, I need acquaintances. You know what I'm saying? I need people to talk to and be around and shit. I don't need a whole lot. But five to 10 acquaintances will do me well. You know what I'm saying? It will do good to me. I need that shit. You know what I'm saying? I'm tired of being alone. I need people to socialize and talk to and shit. Socialization and talk can improve your mood. It can make you feel happier and shit. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, back to the video I have.
Downward spiral that ends in self-isolation and chronic loneliness. Another thing many people who consume a lot experience is a mental numbness that makes boredom feel okay because it impacts the reward system of your brain.
Oh no.
Great, but good enough.
This is
You
terrible.
can spend your days killing time binging mildly interesting stuff, being numb rather than having fun. Boredom is a signal to your mind
We'll
to
do
get
that to
creative
you.
or learn something new, but this is suppressed. This also makes quitting so much harder because your daily routines suddenly seem boring and unexciting, making it very tempting to go back. If you find yourself using constantly, this can also stunt your development as a person. The numbness dulls bad feelings, making it easy not to deal with them. But in life, you can only get over bad feelings if you actually feel them, and you have to process them to grow. Lastly, let's talk about physical withdrawal symptoms.
And before we get into withdrawal symptoms, this is true. You know what I'm saying? In order to get over a problem, you have to process that problem, accept it, in order to grow. I agree with that statement, what he said. You know what I'm saying? There's a lot of issues and problems I deal with. And the best way to get over it is you just gotta kind of accept it, try to process that problem, try to calculate that problem, work away on how to solve that problem in order to get better, right? So that's what I do in certain situations and shit like that. Especially, while I was in jail and coming out of jail and shit. I went through a lot of shit. So you kind of just go through that, you know what I'm saying? Let me, you know what I'm saying, try to make a positive out this negative. Man, well, let's go and get to the withdrawal symptoms.
The more you consume, the worse they'll be for you, especially if you use daily. Withdrawal can cause headaches, sweating or chills, decreased appetite, in severe cases even fever, nausea and abdominal pain.
Damn.
You might have trouble
That's a
falling
lot of
asleep,
withdrawal
and if you do,
symptoms.
you might have disturbing and vivid dreams. The withdrawal can put you in a depressive mood where life feels...
So you can have vivid dreams with the withdrawal as well. Oh my goodness. My dreams, I do dream. I dream quite often, believe it or not. I am a dreamer. I be having dreams and shit. Not all the time, but I'll say I've heard lately I've been dreaming almost every night. So, yeah.
Daft and pointless. You can feel restless, angry, anxious, or nervous. You may feel unable to do anything at all. After a few days, these symptoms will begin to subside, and after a few weeks, they'll be gone entirely. The exact time depends on how much and how long you've been consuming cannabis. Now, let's get to the worst part. Weed may damage your brain. This section was
It
not
will
fun to
damage your
research
brain.
because there's fierce debate among researchers how bad weed is for your brain and whether it has irreversible long-term consequences or not. There's no consensus yet, and it's hard to say anything definitive. Having said that, THC directly interferes with critical brain chemistry. There is some
Damn.
evidence that it may alter its structure. If it does, this may
You saw that person's brain went out. That person's brain just went out. He ran out of gas. Shit, funny, man.
go away again if you quit after a few years, or not. We don't know yet. The consequences vary a lot between individuals, but especially for heavy users, they have a variety of potentially unfunny downsides. The most common one is that your memory gets significantly worse. It may reduce your ability to learn, your reasoning, perception, attention span, decision-making, language abilities, and impulse control.
Damn, man,
Most
that's
negative
just too
effects
much.
seem to go away, or at
That's
least
just too
weaken over
much.
time after you quit. But again, we simply don't know enough and need more research. Where the evidence is much clearer is that consuming a lot of weed is really bad for teenagers on multiple levels. If you start using heavily early, you have many more years to build up potentially negative side effects. Teens who use a lot
So saying weed is worse for teenagers versus adults. I guess that's common sense. But anyway, let's go and keep watching.
are much more likely to become addicted to weed. This may just be correlation, and weed may not be the underlying cause, but heavy weed users are more likely to perform poorly in school and less likely to finish their education. They are, on average, less satisfied with their life and what they've achieved. This may simply be because if your memory and motivation are stunted, you have fewer interesting experiences and forget the ones you do have. And there is strong evidence that teen users are way more likely to develop mental health issues like psychosis, schizophrenia, depression, or anxiety later in life. Once again, the younger you start, the higher the risk, and it also seems to rise massively with high THC doses, making highly potent cannabis products even more dangerous for teens. Okay, let's wrap this up. We've only focused on the negative sides in this video. That was the whole point. As we said before, for most people, weed in moderation is totally fine and definitely way less harmful.
I believe you know what I'm saying, you can smoke weed in moderation, you know what I'm saying, but generally speaking, I don't think weed is good for people to do. I mean, I don't recommend weed, but for people out there that do smoke weed or that are addicted to it, or there are some people that are literally prescribed weed. Like a doctor might literally prescribe them weed because they need it, type shit. But I always say, if you do any type of alcohol or anything, do it in moderation. Do not do it more. Right? You know what I'm saying? But for me, I don't like the idea of drugs at all. You'll never see me doing weed or alcohol. You'll never see me smoking, or you'll never see me drinking alcohol. That's for sure. And I don't recommend nobody does it because what is it doing for you? You know what I'm saying? Drinking don't do shit for you. Drinking is a complete waste of time. And weed should only be used in moderation or if a doctor prescribe it to you. But even so, I don't think weed should be used at all because it does nothing for you. But anyway.
Alcohol. You do you. We're not your parents. The upside of moderation is also that when you do it, your experience will be more intense and special. But for teens, weed, especially using it regularly or a lot of it, is a bad idea, with potentially life-changing consequences. We know that criminalization did nothing to make this better. We now have a new chance under legalization. It begins with being open and honest about the state of science and acknowledging that weed is one drug among many others.
I don't go outside. I do not like needles, man. Needles is something I do not like. Man, I do not like injections, man. I do not like injections. My body do not react well to injections, man. It does not.
Certainly not the worst one by a long shot, but also problematic for at least 1 to 3 out of 10 people using it. If you really have to try cannabis, there is a time and place, and that's in your 20s. If you're younger, the science is clear. Don't do it. At least, not yet. You'll have plenty of time to experiment later. Let's do a different experiment now. With the help of today's...
Okay. And that's the end of this video, you know what I'm saying? From here, it's getting ready to do a sponsorship, it's getting ready to do an advertisement. So that's the end of this video, you know, so that's the end of this weed video. I hope y'all enjoyed this weed video, you know what I'm saying? Do not do weed, you know what I'm saying? For real, you know what I mean? I hope y'all enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and I will catch y'all on the next YouTube video. Yo.